If you walk into any outdoor store, you'll find hundreds of knives, all claiming to be the ultimate survival tool. Full tank, carbon steel, bushcraft, tactical, premium steels, exotic handle materials, it's all there. But what actually matters when your knife becomes your most important piece of equipment? Today, we're joined by Walter Meyer from Wild Medics to separate marketing from reality and help you choose a survival knife that you can truly depend on when things start getting tough. Walt, good morning. Welcome to part one of two parts in this series, Survival Knives.
Morning, Rian. Thanks for having me. An unusual topic.
Yes, but I think an interesting one and something that you obviously have got a lot of experience with because of all the time that you have been, for the sake of your work, you've had to work out in the bush, and these things all come into play.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's actually been a very core part of my life, I guess. Anything from pocket knives to survival knives.
Mhm.
In fact, in the early 80s, my dad bought me one of those survival knives with a little compass on the back.
Oh,
I
yes.
don't know if you recall those things.
Yes, I do.
It's a lot of people like to say bad things about those knives, but what they did is they did create a lot of interest and probably shaped some lives. In my case, it definitely started interest and shaped a career. Probably most of my life has probably been spent doing what I do because of getting that knife when I was 9. So, yeah, it shows you what influence it can have.
I also remember very distinctly how upset I was when that little compass on the back broke the first time. Because,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They lost their fluid. So if
yeah,
a funny thing with us is, when it was new and everything was as it should be, they were actually quite functional. They actually did work, but you obviously have
yes.
a round little ball compass like that. You need a lot of other tools with it. The thing on its own doesn't really help you, like people think. I mean, it helps a little bit, but yeah.
But
Anyway.
there was this very distinct coolness factor about it. And when the compass didn't work anymore, then, the knife lost quite a bit of that coolness factor. Because, what are
For
you going to
sure.
impress your buddies with now? So, yes, I think a lot of people remember those knives. Well, when people hear the word survival knife, we've all seen the movie 100 times by now, Rambo. We all think of that knife, that huge. It's actually bigger than that. I'm gonna have to go off screen to show the real size. What
Is
actually qualifies as a survival knife?
is it that what you're talking about?
That's the that's it. That is the one.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, people do think of these. So I think firstly, I did mention this in a previous episode where we spoke of bushcraft and things like that. People need to distinguish between what is, say, a bushcraft knife, or what is bushcraft, what is survival, what is a survival knife, what is camping, what is a camping knife, what's hunting, what is a hunting knife. They're not all quite the same, and we're not all meant for the same situation. So if you think about bushcraft, bushcraft is generally it's basically like a hobby. So you go out and you want to be outside and you want to spend as much time as possible outside, and you want to stay there and make it comfortable, and you want to see if you can live off the land and do things like whatever, carve spoons and make furniture, and you know what I mean. It's a different thing to survival. In the survival situation, generally your aim is to get back out or alive, get out alive, get back to civilization, um, and hopefully actually keep the time short that you are in that situation. Then I think people need to also understand survival is not necessarily bush survival. That's what everybody thinks of. It's always in the wilderness. You may well be in an urban setting or in a disaster setting or something where you may need to survive, and where a knife would be useful. And then you might want something slightly different again, and so on. But then obviously hunting has got its own requirements. Hunting you generally do not require these massive big knives for. You'll see that for hunting, normally a slightly shorter knife with a nice belly for skinning and so forth. That's really what is needed. And then for the same with camping and hiking and so forth, lighter weight, because the knife is performing tasks like food preparation and so forth. Okay, so if we're talking about survival now specifically, this is where something has definitely gone wrong, and you may be doing things with that knife that you wouldn't want to do with that knife, or you may be in a situation where you don't have all the various tools. If I need to dig a hole in the sand, I would rather have a shovel, but in that situation, you might only have a knife. So now you're digging the hole with a knife, which is obviously not ideal, but if that's what you have, that's what you have, right? So, kind of the characteristics differs a bit on the knife. And then also, you do get survival knives, which are created to be job specific. For instance, you get pilot survival knives, and you get combat survival knives, and you get you often get knives in this what they call SEER survival knives. So survival and escape and evasion and all of that type of stuff. So military roles and whatever. So and some knives are obviously also more custom to certain roles. It's a wide range of things. And then I think there's also this saying about that they say about firearms and all these things is that the best survival knife is the one you have on you when the shit hits the fan, right? So because it doesn't really help you, it's lying in the safe at home, and you're stuck somewhere in the bush or whatever, or in a disaster zone.
Last night I was speaking to Ridwan down in Durban, and I said to him, I often use my sharp wit as a bladed weapon.
There you go. You can also dig a hole with it.
It has been known to do various things.
Multifaceted.
If you were stranded in the wilderness, out in the bush, and you could take only one blade, knife, what tasks should that knife realistically be able to handle?
Yeah, that's a very difficult question. You're going to get lots of different opinions on that. Obviously, I think with tasks and a knife, firstly, understand it's a knife, so its purpose is to cut. Anything else that you're doing with it, if you start chopping with it, if you start betoning with it or whatever, digging holes with it, like I mentioned earlier, that sort of thing, then you are really working outside of the purpose of a knife. Okay, so it's nice if your knife can handle that type of thing on occasion and survive, but understand that it wasn't meant for it in the first place, and it was probably not constructed for it. So the primary thing would be to be able to handle cutting tasks, and also maybe some chopping, light chopping, that sort of thing, but that depends on the knife. So a shorter knife doesn't chop very well. And some knives by design doesn't chop well, others chop better, and so forth. So that would be for, chopping small branches, clearing a path, anything like that, making a shelter, something like that. So those would be the primary jobs you wanted to do. It's nice if it can handle food preparation and so forth. Now, all knives in theory can handle food preparation, just not as nice as the next one, if you understand what I'm saying. So, if your aim is to slice perfect slices of tomato or something like that, a big survival knife will probably not be the primary choice, right? But can a survival knife do that? Sure, it can slice tomatoes. It's just going to be chunky tomatoes. But you understand what I'm saying. So there isn't really always this idea of this knife is perfect for this role. I think it's, like I said, in a disaster like that, hopefully it's something that you have with you, and that you don't have to leave behind because it's too odd looking or too heavy to carry. So that would kind of be where what I would hope for.
I'd love, if you're going to slice a tomato with a massive blade like this, I'd enjoy it if you could send me the video, because
I'll do
just
a
because that would be cool. That's what I think in any case. So,
yeah.
is there an ideal sort of blade length that you consider that you would consider for as a true survival knife, and if so, why?
Yeah, so most of survival knives start here from about 4 inches and up, right? So what would 4 inches be? About 10, 12 centimeter blade length, something like that. And up. That's not to say you can't survive with something smaller, but that makes the blade useful for those bigger tasks. I think what needs to be remembered with that once again is that all these things have pros and cons, right? So a big knife has got pros and also cons over a smaller knife, and the same goes the other way. But generally speaking, a bigger knife can perform the tasks of a small knife, but a small knife can't perform the tasks of a bigger knife, if that makes sense. So a somewhat bigger, bulkier, beefier knife is generally going to do more than a small, thin-bladed knife.
Can a folding knife be a survival knife, or should it rather be a fixed blade?
That's interesting because I think that is what people might end up with in a survival situation, because traveling with a folding knife, for instance, is a lot easier. It's more likely
Yeah.
that you actually have that on you, especially if you're talking about urban disasters and so on. I mean, if I take myself, for instance, I'm pretty much never without a folding knife. But I often don't have a fixed blade or don't have a fixed blade at hand. I would, have to walk to a car or walk to a bag or something to get one.
Mm.
And also when traveling internationally, sometimes fixed blades and so on becomes an issue. And even folding knives are issues when traveling. So you need to be quite cautious of that, obviously. And you might end up with something like a fruit peeling knife or something as your only knife that you can carry with you. But I guess that's almost a separate topic in a sense. But let me show you something. You can ask.
Oh, yes.
Okay,
Yes, that works.
here's your no. So obviously this is a massive big folder. This is a Cold Steel 5 Max. So this would probably classify as a folding survival knife. I think folding knives have got certain limitations because of inherently there's a weakness there, right?
Yes.
Now, even with something like this, you can go see online, for instance, the crazy test these people do with this knife, for instance, and this lock mechanism. But still, there is a lock mechanism, so it is something that can fail. Not to say that a fixed blade knife can't fail. Fixed blade knives fail all the time, so it's. But yeah, that the lock mechanism is something that obviously is an issue for certain tasks and for safety. There, I'll show you something else. There's one of the methods some knife companies try to overcome that is to create a knife with a pin. Okay, so here's another knife with quite of a large folder, and there's a pin, right? And the pin goes in there, and then let me just see where's the thread on this thing. The pin goes in there, and then you screw it in place, and then in theory now you've got a fixed blade knife because of a pin. But once again, it is a potential weak point, right?
Of course,
But a
yeah.
knife like this would go a long way over a standard gentleman's folder or something like that in a survival situation.
Your typical little biltong knife.
Yeah, for that being said, I would still rather have a biltong knife than nothing if I'm in that
No,
situation,
that's
right?
for sure. It's just
Yeah.
if you put your piece of biltong down and you take that thing out, then basically the biltong just cuts itself. When it sees that
Yeah,
thing
you scare it into slices, so.
Yes. Okay, let's talk steel without going into depth, because I think a conversation about different steels that's actually a conversation in itself. Why do you think the average outdoorsman should care what steel their knives are made from?
But still influences a few things. So obviously durability. and then the amount of care that you need to give to that steel, So if you've got a tool steel, a lot of knives are, especially the lower priced knives, are in this sort of D2 or 1095 or whatever, which is essentially a tool steel or a carbon steel. So those can rust. Now, that's not a problem per se if you take care of it. I mean, some of the most regarded survival knives are in sort of 1095 or whatever. If you look at SE knives and so forth, many of them come in that steel and they work brilliantly and there's no problem. But and then obviously when you get stainless steels and so forth. That being said, almost nothing is really completely stainless, right? Everything can rust or get damaged, but it just requires less care to keep it in good shape, right? So the things
Mm-hmm.
that the tool steel influences is obviously, like I said, there's durability, the amount of care you need to give to it, and then also it influences how easy it is to sharpen or resharpen the knife, which of course in a non-ideal setting, you're probably not going to have the best sharpening tools with you, or you might have to sharpen a knife on a rock or something like that. And not all steels work equally well for that. So it is something to consider. I mean, it's a very, very big topic, and you will have a million of opinions about this if you start asking which is best and which is worst, and we can create 6 months worth of arguments. It's like I don't know, throwing a Hilux onto a Ford Ranger chat group or something like that. You're going to have we can create a lot of fights about that, which I'm not in the mood for. But it's essentially the things to consider is how much care do I need to give to this knife? What can this knife handle in terms of the material? So can it handle chopping? Can it handle digging a hole? Can it handle things it's not meant to do? And then how difficult is it to maintain it and to sharpen it and resharpen it and so on. So if somebody wants to go, especially if you're going to go invest in an expensive knife, I would read up and listen to some videos and things about this before, and you can go completely knife nerd and spend your whole day on steel choices or weeks on it. But yeah, so I would recommend to people go and see the information first, find some information. Also
Yeah.
keep in mind, they say opinions are like assholes. Everybody's got one. So it's when you're watching YouTube videos and things like that, always take into account who you're watching and what they're saying. But anyway, there's a lot of factual information about knife steels available
Well,
for people.
on that point, uh, question for the viewers. What do you think is the best blade, steel for a knife blade? Let's hear from you in the comments. Um, on the question of steel, before I ask you about knife tangs, if you edit for a wet environment and you compare that to a dry environment, like more a sort of a deserty type of place, would your choice of blade steel change?
Um, yeah, look, if you know where you're going to end up or you're planning a trip to somewhere, you can pick accordingly, right? So if you're
Mm.
going to work around water more often, a more stainless steel blade would probably be better. If you're going to work around salt water, that changes the game completely, right? So that's the biggest thing that's an issue. So for me, if I know I'm going to be near the ocean or on the coast or on a boat or something, I would pick something else. So I'd
Mm.
pick a steel that's appropriate to that. Once again, people can go read up about that. There's lots of information out there about it. And also some knives will tell you, look, this is specifically a range designed for working around water. So if like Benchmade recently brought out a whole range of knives for water, also for surrounding water. Spyderco have got those and so forth. And if you obviously speak to the manufacturers or speak to a knowledgeable person about it and pick and choose, but especially salt water would influence a choice for me. Yeah.
Okay, full tang versus partial tang. I mean, that's a big debate that you hear on a regular basis. I don't, to begin with, I'm not certain everybody understands exactly what you're talking about when you're talking knife tang.
let's see what I can show you. It's so if you have a knife like this, okay, full tang. Generally, I hope people can see this, but it means there goes the whole blade all the way through, and it is open right at the back. Generally, you have scales on either side, so you can see the back spine of a knife through here. Okay, so this is a fairly, I mean, it's essentially a solid piece of metal. What sometimes happens if you do take the scale off, you might find some manufacturers grind out some spaces underneath this in order to make the knife lighter. There are also some manufacturers who grind out cavity space underneath, so you can take the scales off, and then inside they've got some hidden little survival goodies, you know, like a fire steel or a thread. Basically like the hollow handles used to be with the stuff in the back, right? But they tried to make a full tang with a hollow cavity, essentially. But anyway, that's the point of a full tang. Generally, it sticks out at the back here. So like on this one, you can use that back section there to hammer something, for instance, so you can chop with it and so forth. So that's a full tang knife. And then if you look at something like this is a one of the models of Mora knife. So Mora is quite a well-known brand, very respected knife, generally fairly budget friendly. But this one is a partial tang, right? So the tang will stop somewhere there. If you take the handle off, you can see the shape of it. This one, for instance, has it's got a fire steel sitting here at the back. So it obviously goes without saying that the tang can't go through there. So the tang stops somewhere there. The handle wraps all the way around, and it's generally considered to be somewhat weaker than a full tang. For obvious reasons, if you hammered on there or something, you could snap the handle off. Then benefit of a full tang is generally that if something goes wrong, let's say I break these handle scales, I could take them off, I could wrap a cord around it or cloth around it, and I still have a full knife. Whereas if that happened here, if this handle broke off, I've got a problem because I've got this short little section here. I would have to come up with some way of making a handle, and that will influence well functioning of a knife. So that's really the differences. Then just on these, which we showed at the beginning, this is typically referred to as a hollow handle. So the tang essentially goes up to there, and then this piece is screwed over it. This one is a very high-end one. Okay, so some of these are kind of gimmicky because of the Rambo movies. They are made to be, you know, it's wall hangers and it's fun items. They're not really meant to be hammered. This is a Martin knives in the US custom MC2. So this is, you can go see tests on this thing, for instance. This performs like a full tang knife without a problem. People always say that, oh, no, hollow handles are going to break off here and hollow handles are weak and all of these things. That is by and large nonsense. It's normally people who've never used one or who've handled one, or whose only reference of those toy, you know, the ones we spoke of earlier, the 8-rand checkers, you know, and that's a whole different thing. So you also get the hollow handle knives, which are made out of I don't have one yet to show you, but it's a full piece of metal, which is then turned into a knife. So there's no joint here. It's essentially made out of one bar of metal. So Chris Reeve used to make those. Then we've got a local knife maker, Derek Rauch, makes them. He makes really good ones, also reasonably affordable. They are custom, so they're not cheap, but they're, I mean, affordable knives. So you can have a hollow handle, which is essentially a full tang.
Yeah, and I mean, we've got when it comes to knife builders and designers in South Africa, we've got some amazing guys here. Amazing. I mean, I'm going to mention it. One of my personal favorites is Niels van der Berg from Black Dragon Forge. I've got a whole bunch of his knives, and I mean, they are just so damn good. So they are more expensive, obviously, but if you see the effort these guys put into, if you've ever been to one of these knife shows and you see what they do, they put so much work into that. You can understand why they charge for it. They should.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
Walt?
for sure. You can find all of these things locally. You don't have to get the foreign ones. You can get very good ones locally made. And I think the nice thing then is you can have it custom to whatever design you want and what you really like.
Yes, yeah, 'cause some of them will do a proper custom job for you like that. How important is blade profile and shape, and which design do you think will give you the best balance between strength and utility?
Yeah, look, that once once again, I'm gonna have million guys screaming about this. So the ones that you see most in survival knives is the saber grind and then the full flat grind. So with a saber grind, the essentially you look at the knife and then about halfway down the blade it starts tapering in. Okay, so that gives you a reasonable amount of strength in the spine, makes the blade slightly less flexible and so forth. And then the full flat gives you a higher up grind, essentially.
Hmm.
But you will find knives with all kinds of grinds that people pass off as survival knives and so forth. And this is generally also where your distinction comes in between a bushcraft and a survival knife. Your bushcraft knives, you'll see often with things like this, they are meant for small tasks, okay, where I can shape something, do light woodwork, that sort of thing. Whereas a big survival knife, something like this, the it's meant to do harder, more heavy duty jobs. So you'll find a different type of a grind on that. Um, Again, it influences how easy it is to resharpen the knife. Because you can accidentally change the profile of a knife, for instance, when you're sharpening it and so on. Or you might damage it and have to reshape that profile or whatever. And it's various degrees of difficulty to do that, right? So I would once again suggest people read up quite a bit about it before making a choice. And and then also don't overestimate your own skills for sharpening. And so for sharpening is it's a whole skill set on its own. I know there are a lot of modern tools available for sharpening now, which
Hmm.
makes that job easier and kind of controls it for you. But if you suddenly find yourself in a situation where you've got a little stone or you have an old school oil stone or something to sharpen on, it's a little bit more difficult. You need to learn how to do that.
Okay, my final question for part one of this two-part series is about batoning. I think it's something that's become almost synonymous with survival training. Do you think it's a legitimate skill, or are people simply just abusing their knives?
You do want to open cans of worms. Yeah, so batoning is this idea that I'm going to essentially chop firewood or whatever with a knife. So by placing the wood here and then beating on top of it with a wooden baton. In other words, you're basically doing the job of an axe with your knife. You will find if you go open, like I said, open this can of worms online, you're going to find some vicious opinions about it. Um, I would say that generally your knife is not meant for that. If you're in a survival situation and you just have a one knife,
Hmm.
I would try my best to avoid batoning, because if you break that primary tool that you have with you, you're going to be in deep trouble. So I
That's
wouldn't
true.
necessarily want to do that. The other thing to keep in mind with it is a potentially dangerous activity. So if you're in a survival situation, one of the absolutely last thing you want to do is injure yourself, because aside from not having the facilities to look after that injury, infection could end up being a killer. So any task like that, you need to be really cautious as, do I really need to do this? Or can I, search 5 meters wider and find some smaller pieces of wood rather than having to chop them? That being said, I think it's a worthwhile skill to know of and to practice maybe in a controlled situation. If you like doing knife work and bushcraft and so on, it is something I would definitely practice out of an emergency situation.
Hmm.
So if a need arises for you to do that, then you can do it and you can do it safely. But like I said, in a real situation, I would best avoid it actually.
Okay, I think it's safe enough to summarize that um, know what your purpose or your planned purpose is for the knife that you're getting. I mean, if you're just getting a knife in general, that doesn't really come into play. It doesn't really matter. But if you're getting a knife for a very specific purpose, like hunting, skinning, survival, if that's your thing, being out in the bush, so bushcraft kind of thing, then I think it is necessary that you really do some good homework before you make a final choice, and take it from there. So with that, we're going to end part one. If you like this episode, please click the like button. Please subscribe to the channel and smash that bell icon so that you can get notifications for new videos. If you're interested in any of the training on offer under the Lone Operator badge, there is a link in the description below. As always, check it out. We look forward to seeing you on a range one of these days. Walt, thank you so much.
Thank you, Riaan. Good to see you.